Hello and welcome to the Counter Sport F1 podcast. I'm Darren Timson, joined by Liam Grice, and today we're finally getting to do the pod I think we've been waiting to do since we decided to do these pods. The new F1 season starts this weekend in Australia.
It does. It's finally raw seek, as the Ferrari fans would say. Before we get into talking about the race as a whole, we're just going to preview the season a little bit, as it is the first podcast we're doing of these. We're going to go through the drivers. We've got new rookies on the grid this year, where we think each team's going to finish. Maybe we'll talk about some teams more than others, as I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to talk about Sauber. But anyway, and yeah, before we get into it all as well, we're going to be maybe doing these weekly ahead of race weekends, previewing each race, talking about the events from the races before, and just enjoying ourselves. As Darren said, we finally get to do an F1 podcast, so yeah, looking forward to doing these.
Yeah, very much so. It was one of the things we wanted to do straight away, but we thought we didn't want to get into it halfway through a season. We thought we'd wait and just focus on football, but the time has finally come. It's March. Do you want to kick us off with Sauber then, Grice?
I mean, there's not much to say really on Sauber, is there? No, look, they have a new driver lineup for this season. No more Guan Yu Zhou and Valtteri Bottas. It's now the experienced Nico Hülkenberg moving from Haas and rookie Gabriel Bortoleto, who, if I'm not mistaken, did win the F2 Championships last year. So he has a bit of pedigree coming into the season. But as we've seen in recent years, it doesn't necessarily always translate to F1. You're either an Oscar Piastri or a Nikita Mazepin. There's no real difference in them. I'm intrigued to see what you think, because we were talking about it off air before we began. They are switching to Audi next year after the regulations changed. Is this just going to be a bit of a lull year for Sauber, do you think?
Yeah, I think Sauber this year especially. Last year wasn't good for them. I don't think this year is going to be particularly good for them either in terms of the season, but they are probably the one team that's coming into this year not really caring about where they're going to finish. I guess, like you said, you got Bortoleto, the rookie, you've got Hülkenberg. They're obviously drivers they're probably looking for from 2026 onwards when they do become Audi, especially Hülkenberg. Bortoleto, I think he's the most unfortunate rookie of this new season. He's going to be down at the bottom the whole time, and I already feel bad for him. He's probably going to think it's not going well for him when I don't really know what much he's actually going to be able to do. And I really hope from his point of view that he doesn't get axed halfway through the season, because, like I said, what are Sauber really hoping for this year? Because it can't really be to finish in the mid-table. They aren't good enough. We've already seen it in testing. They're going to be down at the bottom. I hope this year for Bortoleto, especially, is just going to be a year where he can learn the sport, learn F1, learn the cars, and then hopefully go next year. Like you said, good driver, won the F2. Not many people can do that. So really, really hoping he's going to do well this year and not take the misery of finishing at the bottom too harshly.
The back marker car is never one you really want to be in, but somebody has to be it. You mentioned it, last year they finished dead last with 4 points, despite having what I thought at the start of the season was a pretty decent driver lineup in Guan Yu Zhou and Valtteri Bottas. I thought they would have got more than 4 points, but yeah, as we've both said, I think this is maybe going to be a bit of a dud year for Sauber as they look to move into the Audi name for the new regulations in 2026. We'll move up the standings from last year, and one of the more entertaining teams from last year, one I'm looking forward to seeing this year with their new driver lineup, that's Williams. I'm intrigued to see what you think about this. I think they've got, on paper, one of the strongest lineups on the grid, which is strange to say for Williams because they've not been great the last few years. Alexander Albon, former Red Bull driver, and Carlos Sainz, a former Red Bull driver, sit in the Williams car. And well, they finished, what was it, 9th last year, 17 points. Surely they can't do worse than that with that driver lineup.
No, you wouldn't think so, but I think they are probably going to finish 5th this year. I have a sneaky feeling they're going to overtake Aston Martin. like you said, they've probably got a better driver lineup as a pair than Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. And the car looks decent. It didn't look too bad in testing. Like you said, they can't do any worse than last year, but they potentially might just be able to find themselves in fifth. I, but on the other side for me with this driver lineup, and I want to hear your thoughts on this because yeah, I do think it's a strong lineup, but when Colapinto came into the side last year, I think we saw Albon struggle a little bit with the pressure. Carlos Sainz isn't a back market driver. He is a guy that does deserve to be at the top. He's gone to a team that's a mid-table for this year anyway. I potentially see a scenario where Albon is going to struggle a lot. I don't necessarily see him. Say if Williams get a podium this year, I don't know if it's going to be Albon. I think it might be Sainz. And especially with that, how close is that gap going to be? Because if it's more than a second and a half to 2 seconds in qualify, or not qualifying necessarily, but in the race, if Albon's further down and Sainz is in that eighth position, seventh, eighth position, and Albon isn't really anywhere near that. He's not in the top 10. Things might just go downhill for him from there. I don't know what's your thought on that.
Yeah, it's definitely the major question mark about Albon, isn't it? I mean, when he made that move from, what was it, AlphaTauri Toro Rosso, I don't know what it was called when Albon was there, it's changed so much, to Red Bull, he did struggle with the pressure alongside Verstappen. I mean, who wouldn't? It's Max Verstappen. But then he moved to Williams, and it looked like a bit of a fresh start for him. He did well in the Williams. He got 12 points last season, and with his former teammate Logan Sargent got 0. So there's a bit of a gap there. But as you mentioned, when Colapinto came in, he did struggle a little bit, and Colapinto got 5 points. There's only a 7-point gap between him and Albon, and he only raced in what felt like 6-7 races. So there are a few signs there that Albon could struggle, especially with a teammate, like you said, of the caliber of Carlos Sainz. But I also agree. We don't agree very often, but I do agree. I think Williams will certainly make a jump up those driver standings this year. I think 5th, 6th is a good spot for them. James Vowles, the team principal, seems very optimistic about their chances of making that leap up the grid this year, and it'd be nice to see Williams back up there again, maybe getting a podium or two. But yeah, Williams challenging for points. That seems like a nice thing to see going into the new season.
Yeah, especially we all want to see Williams do well. I think it's Williams as a team. I think everyone likes. So I think seeing them back in the points and potentially fighting for podiums is just a good thing for the sport in general. We'll move on then to 8th last year, Visa Cash App Red Bull, or RB, sorry.
Not sponsored. Not sponsored.
No. Like I said, they finished 8th last year, 46 points. They've gone for a new driver lineup this year as well. Isaac Hadjar comes into the side. He finished second in the F2 standings last year behind Bortoleto. Was actually leading the F2 for quite a while. Bortoleto had to come from around 5th, 6th in the last few races, and then eventually ended up winning the title for him. So we'll see how Hadjar deals with that. He probably would have hoping to expect to win the title. Car failed him in the last few races, so we'll see how that works. Obviously, Yuki Tsunoda as his teammate this year, and I know we spoke about it on the chat a couple of days ago, that you think Hadjar might be the first to leave. So I'll let you talk about that, and then I'll give you my thoughts as well.
It's not because I don't think he's a good enough driver, because I mean, finishing second in F2 is no small feat. I just think with that Red Bull, I'm going to call it Toro Rosso because it is Toro Rosso, sort of circle, there's a lot of pressure, especially from the higher ups. And we've seen drivers in the past really struggle with that pressure. I mean, even Daniel Ricciardo struggled with it last year, and we know how good of a driver he can be on his day. Obviously, he's left the sport now. Hadjar's young. He's got Yuki Tsunoda for a teammate who I think is very underrated on this grid, and personally I would have loved to seen him get a chance in the Red Bull this year, but I'm sure we'll get onto that when we speak about them. And if Yuki starts the season well, bang on form like he did end last campaign, and Hadjar really struggles to get to grips with what is notoriously quite a hard car to get to grips with, that Toro Rosso, it's just a lot of culminating factors that I think could cause Red Bull to sort of have a look and go, is he really fit enough to be in the F1 lineup? Is there another driver we could go for in this sister team seat? Maybe that could happen. But I mean, I'm hoping Hadjar manages to fit into F1 very well and proves that he deserves to be in this seat. I just think he could be that driver that gets kicked out in his rookie season, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you've just said there. Yuki Tsunoda is really strong. We've seen him beat all of his teammates so far that he's had at various name team. But look, Hadjar, I think the thing for me, and I said this to you the other day, I would probably agree with you more if it wasn't likely that Tsunoda's going to leave at the end of the season. I don't know if that's going to happen, of course, but I can't imagine Tsunoda's going to be there for very long. He's not got his chance at Red Bull. If Lawson will get onto them, does a good job, then he's not going to get a chance this year either. So I think he's going to go, and I think for V to cash out RB, that the best thing for them to do would be to just support Hadjar. We know his mentality, well, not his mentality, but he's had more outbursts than Tsunoda has.
And that's saying something.
And that does say something. So it'll be interesting to see how that's managed this season, if that potentially goes against him, because it did for Tsunoda for quite a while. And I think that's the reason why he wasn't given the chance earlier on. But like I say, I think they need to support Hadjar, and he's showed he's a good driver in the various junior formats. Give him the chance this year. Tsunoda probably will beat him, but if he's closer at that back end, that second half of the season, then I think you're onto a good driver there, and he may as well support him going into the new regulations, because I don't think they would really want to have a situation next year where they have to replace two drivers and get a new two rookies. They'd probably want to have someone already established there. So yeah, I think we'll see. For me, I think they'll probably be where they were about last year, 8th, 7th place. I don't really see them getting higher than that. I don't know about you. Do you see them taking over our next team, Haas?
Yeah, I think they'll be around where they were last season. Maybe 9th. I mean, it's not because they're going to be
that's true.
terrible, but I just think a lot of the teams around them are going to be a bit stronger this year. So
yeah, especially if Williams make that jump up.
Exactly. Yeah, if Williams make the jump up, then it bumps everybody down, and through no fault of their own, they could just find themselves in 9th. Which, to be fair, going on a bit of a tangent, obviously the lower you finish in the Constructors' Championship, the more time you get in the wind tunnels and things like that could be a good thing going into the new regulation season. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, for sure.
Haas. I do not know what to make of Haas. They've made some moves in the off season. They've signed a deal with Honda to sort of boost their technological compartments. They're going to have a simulator in a couple of years, which is something they've not had ever in their F1 history. They've been using Ferraris. 7th last year, 58 points is not a terrible season for Haas. They've been a lot worse than that, and I think they showed signs of promise during that season. Obviously, they did have a quite strong driver lineup in Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg, who's, as we've mentioned, has now moved on to Sauber for this season. And the driver lineup has completely changed. There's no more of them two. It's Esteban Ocon, who's made the move from Alpine, which is a very interesting move. I'll be intrigued to get your thoughts on this. And another rookie, Ollie Behrman, who displayed his class, not in a Haas, in a Ferrari last season. I think he did very well, coped to the demands of F1. So I'm intrigued to see what he can do with a full season. But just circling back to my point, do you think Ocon made the right move going to Haas?
Look, you know what? I think he might have. I think Haas made some serious steps forward last year. Forgive me, I can't think of the team principal's name off the top of my head right now, but I think he's been a really good appointment. I think he's much better than Gunther Steiner. I'm not going to go into too many of my opinions on him right now, but he took the team forward last year, which after a few years has been a bit stagnant, 58th. And look, to be fair to Haas, they're only 7th because Alpine had that amazing score in Brazil. They would have finished 6th if it wasn't for the rain in Brazil. So I think you've got to give that credit to Haas. Ocon moving to Haas, I think. Look, we'll have to see how the season goes, but I like that he's taken that risk. He's gone away from Alpine. He's gone to a team which he does believe in, and I think, like you just mentioned there, Haas are only ever going to get better. You just said they're getting Honda, they're getting that simulator. These next few years for Haas, I think they are going to get really good. Behrman for me is the interesting one though. Did not have a good year in F2.
No.
I think that has to be said. Finished 12th. He did obviously have a few races with the F1, especially that Saudi Arabia one, where I think he put his F2 car on Paul the Premier, and then
Yeah.
had to race in the F1. Yeah.
Oh, what a shame.
What a shame that was for him. So look, maybe the points are a bit skewed there. He was beaten by his teammate Antonelli last year. How will he cope this year against an experienced driver? Don't know. But again, like many of the rookies this year, I think you've just got to give them that chance. You've got to give them those few races to get used to the car. Good thing for Behrman, though, he does have that little bit of experience. He's driven Haas a couple of times last year, so he's got that for him over a few other rookies. And look, you know what? For Haas, I think this could be quite a decent year for them. If they can maybe take a few points off Aston Martin, if they can potentially challenge in the top 10 a lot more this year, who knows? They could be in for a really good season.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Haas can probably only get better. They're a team with a lot of potential. They just don't deliver on it sometimes. And this driver lineup for me is quite a strong one. They've got a really good, experienced race-winning driver and a really promising, good young rookie, thanks to their links to Ferrari, who can gain experience in F1 and will probably race for Ferrari one day. And then you've got the Esteban Ocon, who has the know-how to grind out points. We've seen him do it in the Alpine over the course of his career. That race in Austria sticks in my mind. And, you know, it's like I said for RB, Honda, RB, PT, or whatever you want to call it. It's how well the teams do around them is dependent on where they finish. And like you said, if they can take points off the Aston Martins, off the Toro Rossos, off the Williams, then yeah, could be a pretty decent mid-table season for Haas. I mean, that's what we're all excited for, isn't it? I mean, you know, I'm really excited to see Ollie Behrman, though. I think he did really well in the Ferrari last year, so looking forward to see what he can do in F1 now he's been given his chance. We'll move up again to the team I should probably support, given my family links to it in Alpine. But given what I know goes on in their car, I don't have much faith in them. Alpine have been a team, even when they were Renault, that showed glimpses of getting back to their best. And then there were some races where you just have no hope at all from a driver and a team perspective. They finished sixth last year, 65 points. As you mentioned, that brilliant drive in Brazil was probably the main factor for that. And their driver lineup, I'm going to be honest, doesn't fill me with much confidence. Pierre Gasly is a solid driver, race winner, but he didn't wow me last season. I think he's sort of stagnated a little bit. Maybe in Jack Doohan, another rookie coming in, he's, again, doesn't really inspire me, but he's a very solid driver. He will probably get you a few points in the Alpine and has a bit of promise. I mean, let me look where he finished in F2 last season, if I can do it quickly enough. No, I can't. Anyway.
He finished third in the 2023 season. Last year, he was Alpine reserve driver.
That's it, yeah. So he's probably had experience in the Alpine, but for me, I think if they'd have kept Ocon, obviously there was a lot of issues with Gasly and Ocon, that's probably why Ocon left. If they'd have kept Ocon and built on what they had last season, I would have had a bit more optimism for them. But for me, Alpine maybe are the team that I think are going to sort of sink further down in that grid with other teams around them gaining their confidence. I'm intrigued to see what you think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And like you just said there, the Brazil result, Alpine would have finished 8th last year. You know, let's not forget that. They would have finished 8th if it wasn't for Brazil. So they obviously got a few more millions to add to their investment for this year's car. And look, I don't really know where where to put them this year. Like you said with Jack Doohan, I really like Pierre Gasly. I've always really liked him. Last year, I do agree with you that he did have a bit of a stagnant season. But now he is going to be the main guy. If there's ever been a year for him to really turn up, I think this year is the year for him to
Yeah.
do that. Jack Doohan, on the other hand, I fear for him. I really do. I think there is a possibility that by the time we reach potentially Saudi Arabia at the end of April, maybe Miami, that he's not going to be in that car. Franco Colapinto is waiting in the wings.
Yeah.
I I think Jack Doohan is going to be used as a bit of a scapegoat, and I really don't want to see that. I don't want to see a young driver put through that. But when you look at his junior record, it doesn't really fill you with much confidence. And if you think about some of the drivers that hasn't made F1, and you look at Jack Doohan, you do kind of have to wonder how he's done it.
Yeah.
And obviously, being that reserve driver for a year, I think that's probably where it's come from. But look, I don't know. I think I would be very, very surprised to see Jack Doohan in that car by May. And I don't even think it will have much to do with his results. I just think that he's going to be used as a scapegoat. Maybe Gasly does okay. Jack Doohan might be closer to the bottom, getting used to a car, and then they just say, right, we're putting Franco Colapinto in the car. Sorry, Jack Doohan, see you later. And it'll be a shame because I don't know if he'll get another F1 chance after that either. So it's a bit of a rough. It's potentially looking like a little bit of a rough season for Alpine. I hope not. Like I said, I really like Pierre Gasly. I've always liked him since he came into the sport. Obviously struggled at Red Bull, but he's really found his feet, won that race in Monza. He just seems like a nice guy, so I want to see him do well.
Yeah.
We'll move on. We'll move on to Aston Martin, and I think the thing with Aston Martin is just the same every year. Fernando Alonso is going to do what Fernando Alonso does, and Lance Stroll, you're going to watch him and just be surprised how he's still racing an F1 car. Any notes on that?
Spot on. We're actually agreeing a lot more than usual on one of these podcasts. Now, I've always said if you put Fernando Alonso in one of the top 3 cars, he has a chance of winning the championship. It's a shame he's in that Aston Martin. And if Lance Stroll wasn't in a car as solid as the Aston Martin, we'd really see him for the driver that he is. Don't get me wrong, he showed signs of promise. I'll always remember that podium with Williams when they were on their decline, but he's good in the wet, but that's really about all I can say that's a positive about Lance Stroll. He gets constantly battered by his teammate, which isn't a surprise when it's Fernando Alonso. To be fair to him, obviously, Nando finished on 70 points last year in 9th, and Lance Stroll was in 13th on 24. So there is a very big gap there for a car that showed signs of it's a bit like the drivers, to be honest, showed signs of promise early in the season and then just sort of slowly drifted into mid-table mediocrity as the season went on. And we're saying all this, 5th is not a bad finish when you consider the 4 teams we're going to get onto in a second. Best of the rest, as they like to call it, solidly best of the rest as well. 30 points ahead of 6, so it's not a bad season for Aston Martin at all. Were there opportunities for more points? Yes. If there was maybe another driver in that second seat, would they have given 4th place a little bit more of a chance? Maybe. It's all hypotheticals. You know, the gap to Mercedes was considerable. I mean, almost 400 points. So there is a bit of a gap there. But Aston Martin, I'm intrigued to see what you think about this. Aston Martin frustrate me because they have all this promise. They have the new facilities. They have a driver as good as Fernando Alonso, and they pair him up with, quite frankly, in my opinion, somebody who's not good enough to be in the 5th best car on this grid.
Yeah, there's 5 rookies this year in F1, and Lance Stroll is still the worst driver on the grid, in my opinion. I don't know what we're doing with Lance Stroll in 2025. His dad owns the team, and that's all it is. There's just no other way around it. He's in the sport because his dad owns the team, and to be honest, from his dad's point of view, his dad's a businessman. Get your son out the team, and you'd get more points, and you'd probably make a little bit more money as well. We spoke about it before with Williams, with Sainz and Albon as potentially a stronger pairing. It's not because they're better drivers than Alonso. It's just because as a pair, they're better than Stroll.
They're going to get more. Yeah, they're going to get more points over the course of the season.
Yeah, they'll get more points than Stroll will. I think. we'll have to see where Williams finish, but we know what Fernando Alonso can do in an F1 car, and if there's a chance for points ahead of
He'll get
Sainz,
them.
he'll probably get them ahead of
Yeah,
Sainz. And if you put him with a good partner, who knows where the fuck they could finish? Excuse my language,
exactly.
but that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah,
This year, obviously, they have Adrian Newey coming into the side, so he's not had real any impacts on the car. Maybe after testing, he's had a few, he's been able to have a look at
yeah.
it, and maybe he's been able to make some tweaks there. So they are probably for me the team right now that I'm looking at. I don't really know where they're going to finish just because of that Adrian Newey factor. The car that starts the year might not be the car that ends the year.
Yeah. I think
Uh,
2026 is probably the year for Aston Martin if you're gonna
yeah,
look at them for maybe a top 3 push.
yeah, but they have to also change the driver
Yeah, yeah. That goes without saying.
there. Mercedes, then Liam, new driver pairing this year. George Russell is the main man finally for him. Kimi Antonelli comes into the side, replacing the legendary Lewis Hamilton. It's going to be an interesting year. I keep saying the word interesting. I do apologize about that. Just ignore
Get
it.
thesaurus, come on.
But it is though, because you've got Kimi Antonelli, who is the wonder kid for F1. He's better rated now than Max Verstappen was at the same age. He had an okay year last year in F2. He started pretty slowly, then eventually found his feet. But also, you got to remember that Prema was shit. They were
Yes, they
not a
were
very good
awful.
car to drive. I don't think F2 has been a good, doesn't seem like a good car. The cars in F2 seem good to drive at the minute.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to even make of that. But I think Antonelli's going to have a slow start. But I think when he gets into it, he will really, really get into it and he'll show what he can do. George Russell, like I said, main man this year. Mercedes look good. I don't really know where they're going to finish. Could they finish first in the driver standings? I don't. Well, in the constructor standings, I don't think so. Can they beat Ferrari? Maybe not. But will they beat Red Bull? Maybe. And look, I think they might be able to fight for more than 5 wins this year. Hopefully, Antonelli can be up there as well. What's your take on them?
Yeah, it's a lot more of a promising pre-season than it has been in the last few years for Mercedes, given their issues trying to develop a car for the regulations. Obviously, that will completely change next year. But for this year, I think they've got a car now where they're finally happy that they've done the best they can with these regs and got the most. They've stopped trying to be trendy and cool and going about it in a different way, and they've seen what works on these cars, and they're sticking to it now. And it's definitely, like I said, more of a promising season for Mercedes. I think you know my feelings on George Russell. I'm not his biggest fan.
Mm.
Fair enough, he did beat Lewis last season. He is a very good driver. I just think there's a few more issues there. I think he's not experienced enough to be in that team leader role yet. Obviously, he has been in F1 for a very long time, given his age, but I'm not convinced he's the right person to nurture the talent that is Kimi Antonelli, because I completely agree with you there. He's the next F1 champion in waiting. He will win multiple F1 championships, I think, and I'm not sure Mercedes have necessarily got it right that George Russell is the one nurturing this really good up and coming talent. Russell had Hamilton. There's a bit of a disparity between their two upbringings, and I
But
think
what you got
that's
to
made.
remember, Grice, sorry to cut you in
No, go
there.
on.
So what you got to remember, Toto Wolff wants Max Verstappen, so clearly he thinks the same thing as well.
See, great minds think alike. You know what I mean? But I just, I agree. There's all this promise. I keep saying the word promise. I need a thesaurus as well for Mercedes this season. There's just something telling me they're not going to have as good a season as they should do. They've got a good car. They've got two very solid drivers. I mean, obviously, we don't know how Kimi's going to adapt to F1 yet, but on paper, he should be a very solid top 7 driver every single race. There's just something telling me that they're not going to deliver on this, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think it has the initials of GR. I
Yeah,
think
you
that's
know
what
what?
it is.
I think I do agree with you there. The thing is, for me, it's not about his mentality. We saw him dominate F2 when he was
Yeah,
in it before he came into the sport, into F1. So I don't think it's a mentality issue there necessarily with pressure for George Russell. But again, though, it might be. We've seen a spat with Max Verstappen, and you can have your opinion on that all you like. But one driver is clearly over that. Another driver is still
yeah,
talking about it in
hmm
interviews. He's
yeah.
not gotten over it. How is he going to deal with a Max Verstappen, a Lewis Hamilton, a Lando Norris competing with him for the title this year? I
There's
don't
a
know.
lot of pressure, a lot of
We
pressure.
we saw Lando crumble to it a little bit last year. Lando himself has even admitted that. If George Russell can't get over a little bit of drama with Max Verstappen, how is he going to handle a title fight with potentially Max Verstappen himself? I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
On
sorry to cut you off.
yeah,
I think also going along with that, a lot of the focus from especially the media and people in the paddock is going to be on Kimi Antonelli because he's
yeah,
this star boy, and I don't think Russell is necessarily going to like the fact that there's a lot more attention on this young kid that's coming through because he had it when Hamilton was his teammate. He sort of had a little bit more. Obviously, Hamilton's great, but Russell had that attention of, oh, he's beaten Hamilton this season.
hmm,
He's got this, he's got that. He had the wind in his sails, and now there's this young kid coming through with all this promise of an F1 world champion, and I'm not sure how Russell's going to deal with that.
yeah, me too. But on the other side from Mercedes, how nice is it to have an Italian driver back in
Very nice,
F1?
very nice. A
It's not
good
happened.
Italian driver.
A good Italian driver. It's not happened for a while. Grice, do you want to take us to Ferrari? I think Red Bull.
Yeah,
Sorry, Red
Red
Bull.
Bull. Yeah, my team, as you can see, Red Bull. I'm not a glory hunter. I want to get that out of the way. I support Red Bull because of Seb Vettel, but from my perspective, a disappointing year in the constructors last season, finishing third in a two-horse race is a Tottenham-esque performance if we're going to link it to football. And there's only really one person that deserves the blame for that, and that's Checo Perez. I was saying it all of last season and was I that I don't think he should have stayed on for
Yeah.
another year. They should have got another young driver in there alongside Max to really give them that desire, I think is the good word. Checo seemed to, pardon the pun, check out of the season halfway through. Didn't really seem interested in pushing for
Mm.
those race wins, and that really hampered them in the constructors. They didn't have the best car on the grid, that has to be said as well. You did see a drop off in their performance as the season went on, and McLaren and Ferrari and even Mercedes developed their cars. They started taking points off them. But what does that say about Max? He still won the
Yeah.
Drivers' Championship comfortably, I might add as well. Obviously, Lando had that little bit of a fall off towards the end of the season, but Max was very consistent the whole way throughout. So a bit of a 50-50 season for them last year, and I can sort of see it being that again. I'm not fully convinced by Lawson. I think he'll do a decent job. I think it's maybe another Albon situation where the pressure might get to him because we talked about it with the junior team, but the pressure at Red Bull is immense. I mean, drivers like Ricardo and like Checo and Kvyat, Albon, they've all struggled alongside Verstappen. It's not easy to drive with him. And okay, Lawson's got experience in this sport, obviously spending the latter half of the season at RB, but is he ready to make that step up to Red Bull? I'm not too sure. I mentioned it before. I would have liked to have seen them gone with Yuki, but
Mm.
maybe that chance has passed now. And from a constructor's point of view, I don't think they're going to be in those top two positions. The car didn't look the best in testing, and I still think Max will do a decent job in the drivers, but it might be a bit more of a struggle season for Red Bull this year. I'm intrigued to see what you think.
I completely agree with again most of what you've just said there. I'll start with the Lawson bit though. I think he's going to be able to fare better than Gasly, Albon, Perez though. Something just tells me with his personality as when I see him in interviews. Um, that interview where he said that it doesn't matter how the car is, you just have to
Yeah,
drive
that's
the
true.
car.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
quite like that. So, look, he's not going to be challenging Max, but I think, like Martin Brundle said the other day on Sky Sports, if he can see Max, then he's doing a good job. So,
You're
I
not wrong.
and I think that's what he's going to do this year. I think he's got that no fuck giving attitude.
Yeah, which is
I don't
important.
think
Yeah.
I think he's obviously going to respect Max, that he has to. You can't really be a driver in F1 if you can't respect a four-time world champion. But I don't think he's going to be necessarily afraid of him, and I don't necessarily think that he's just going to take Max winning, and that's just going to derail his mentality. I think he's just going to keep going every single day. And look, that's what we need with Red Bull. Like you said, I don't think they're going to be anywhere near the top this year with the constructors. I think we'll get onto the top two teams. They finished top two last year. I think they'll finish top two again. Like you say with Max, though, they had troubles in testing. Max said that, the team said that, but they think they may have fixed them. I think that's what the word is. So I don't necessarily know. We'll obviously find out this weekend. Obviously, it would be very nice to have a multiple title fight that includes Max Verstappen. Not necessarily to just see him win a fifth one, but just to see him with a few other drivers, and those drivers that we'll get onto in a second. I think that'd be really, really fun to watch. So I hope he is involved in that. But if he's not, it will be a very disappointing season for Red Bull. We'll go to Ferrari then. Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, best driver pairing on the grid for quite a while, I think is fair to say.
They're not bad, are they? They're okay. Seven-time world champion, and the prince in waiting in Charles Leclerc. It's a decent driver lineup. I think they'll do okay. Now, for me, I'm sure we're going to get onto predictions in a bit, but I'll do a bit of a spoiler. Ferrari are the team to beat this year. They maybe had a few issues in testing, but I think overall very solid car that they've made this year. Lewis is definitely going to be a driving force for this car. We saw it when Seb moved there. He was very much directing the development of the car and how they can improve it. And nobody's not going to listen to Lewis, you know what I mean? He's a seven-time world champion. If he speaks, you listen, and that's really important for Ferrari. They obviously just missed out on the drivers' championship last year to McLaren, and maybe they can go one better this year, especially with this, as you said, best driver lineup on the grid. Lewis is in a car again where he maybe feels like he can win. I don't think he felt that in the Mercedes. He seemed very despondent throughout the season with that car, very frustrated, which is something we've not seen from him in a while. And Charles picked up wins last season. He's got over that hump in Monaco now. He can really kick on, and like I said, Prince in waiting for an F1 World Championship. It's just a shame he's got the best driver of all time next to him that's maybe going to scupper his chances. But I'm intrigued to see what you think about their chances against McLaren, because as you said, it probably is a two-horse race for the title. Do you think they can pip them this year?
I think they can. I think Charles Leclerc and Hamilton will just probably prove to be too strong. The only thing Ferrari, and it's what we've been waiting for. We just want a car that can last the full season.
Yes,
we want it to just last. We want the consistency. If they get that consistency, I think it might not be even that close. They only missed out by 14 points last year, and we could potentially see that grow even further. Big thing for McLaren is, again, we'll get on to in a minute, is how far has Oscar Piastri improved? Because if he can be close to Lando or even beating Lando this year, then they'll be very strong. And that'll be very important for McLaren. But on Ferrari, the thing for me is how the dynamic of Charles and Lewis is going to work. Because like you said there, you can't just bring in a seven-time world champion and not listen to him. Yeah. That's just not going to work. What's the point in that? What's the point in Lewis going there? What's the point in paying all those millions to have him there? But Charles has been number one for quite a while. He is the Ferrari boy. All the fans love him. I know the fans will probably take to Lewis Hamilton very, very quickly, but he is that guy at Ferrari.
Yeah.
He has been a driver for a while. It'll be interesting. Look, the thing for me is if Ferrari are challenging for a potential title, how does Charles beat potentially Lewis to the title? Do they end up taking points off of each other that neither of them win the title? It's going to be really intriguing to watch. I think this year, like many people think, could be the best year in F1 for quite a while, with 4 teams going for the title. potentially 5 drivers potentially going for the title as well. So we'll see how that goes. But I do think I think they have the constructors this year. It just depends for me how Piastri is going to, how much he's improved.
So are you saying the driver lineup is too good?
It might be too good.
Charles and Lewis is too good together.
Exactly. I think it might be.
They've gone on to F1 career mode and cheated their way to a good driver partnership, I think. But no, yeah, it's nice to see Ferrari having that promise at the start of the season. They deserve, they have the pedigree. Ferrari in a championship fight only seems right. And
Yeah.
if Red Bull can maybe get their act together, another three-way, maybe Mercedes four-way fight for the drivers and constructors is what every F1
Yeah.
fan wants, I think. We'll get on to the champions of the constructors championship last year, McLaren. The comeback has been very well received by a lot of people. It's been a long time coming. Zach Brown and his team have done an amazing job to really bring back a team with that much legacy. I don't think they expected to win the championship at the beginning of last season, to be honest with you. I don't think they expected Lando and Oscar would take to the new car as well as they did. They really impressed me last year and deservedly, I think, won the Drivers' Championship. They were definitely the most consistent team over the course of the season. They ended up with the best car. It's like what we spoke about with Ferrari, though. The two drivers just seem to step on each other's toes maybe a little bit too much. It makes me laugh. There's a lot of reports in the media about a spat between Norris and Piastri, and I think that gets blown out of proportion way too much. I'm not sure if you've seen the new episodes of Drive to Survive yet, but they make it seem like they hate each other, and that's just really not the case. It's quite funny to watch. They clearly get along very well. F1's a very high pressure environment. There's gonna be arguments all the time, but at the end of the day, they seem like very good friends, and they're both very, very good drivers. You mentioned before, I think their chances all depend on how well Piastri's developed. We know he's a terrific driver, and I'm going to get onto a little bit of a controversial opinion in a second, but this is the season for me where he makes that step up, and personally, I think he wins a Drivers' Championship before Lando does. I just think Lando is a very, very talented driver, but we mentioned it a lot last season, he has the bottle gene in him. He seems to make the wrong decisions sometimes that in the end you can't afford to make over the course of a race season. And Oscar really doesn't seem to have that. We saw him make decisions for the team, which shows he's a team player, but he also has that killer instinct. And I think that just gives him the edge over Lando for me in terms of going for that Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, like I was just saying a minute ago, a lot this year will depend on Oscar Piastri, and like you've just said, that I do agree with you. The thing for me is how is that going to work? If Oscar Piastri does get better, you just spoke about them getting along. If Oscar Piastri does get onto that level of Lando, or potentially even above Lando, how is that dynamic going to go down? Potentially, you might see a few sparks there. I really like Oscar Piastri. I think he had good moments last year, had a few really bad ones as well. Further away to Lando than perhaps he should have been in a few races. And that's the thing for me this year is he does have to make that step up. He's third year in the team now. He has to be on that level. And look, I agree with you. I think he will, but it's just something that he has to do. And if he doesn't do it, then he'll be in a world of pain, and he probably won't be in McLaren next come 2026 because you're just waiting around for a driver that's not going to deliver. But if he does deliver this year, I don't know if I agree with you. I've had this internal conflict with myself for the past year. I remember me and you standing outside our university class at the start of last year's F1 season, talking about the Lando and Piastri dynamic and talking about how we both thought Piastri will probably be better than Lando in a few years. And Lando, look, he both impressed me and disappointed me last year. He should have done better. But at the same time, he did really well. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation there. And if McLaren are top, Piastri and Lando are fighting for the title. We'll get onto our potential winners in a second. It might just might just leave a door open if you've got two McLarens fighting for a title, two Ferraris fighting for a title, a certain Dutchman might just be able to sneak himself up there with a few wins
No
and get a.
Kiwi, no.
We'll see with that. We'll see about that one. But McLaren's going to be strong this year. Ferrari's going to be strong this year.
100%.
Mercedes will probably be strong this year. Red Bull will wait and see, but they have Max Verstappen. Do you want to go give us your constructors champion now before we do the drivers?
Go on, we'll go constructors first. I think it's the prancing horses year. I think Ferrari finally returned to that top step. They ran McLaren very close, as I mentioned, last time out with, I'm not going to say a bad car, but it was worse than the McLaren, and they just got pipped to the title. So with Charles and Lewis, the strongest lineup on the grid, with good development, with consistency, which is the thing we mentioned, with durability, not engines blowing up every couple of races. This is the year for Ferrari. I'm going Ferrari for the constructors.
Yeah, me too. Completely agree with you there. Do you want to round out the top five?
I'll go Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull. So same three as last year, just in a different order. Then I think it's Mercedes, and then I think it's Williams. I think Williams will be best of the rest. I can see it being very close in that midfield pack, especially between them and Aston Martin. Obviously, we spoke about Fernando, Lance, but the level of being Fernando compared to the very strong lineup of Williams, I think that'll be the close battle in the midfield, and then who knows for the rest.
Very boringly, I have the exact same constructors as you. I was debating between Mercedes, but I think the max factor over Russell will probably be where the difference is. Look, again, it all depends what Red Bull turns up this season. If it's a good car, then undoubtedly so. But if it's a not very good car, then maybe Mercedes will be there. Right, drivers standings then.
Do you want to go mine, yours, mine, yours? Should we do top three the same?
Yeah. Yeah, let's start third. Work our way to first.
I like that. So third, I'm going Lando Norris.
Okay.
Second is Max Verstappen. And first is Lewis Hamilton. I think he gets his 8th this year. I think all depends on what car Ferrari deliver, as we've been saying. But give him a race-winning car, and Lewis dominates, as much as it pains me to say as a Red Bull fan. And I think he just pips Verstappen. It'll be close, but he just pips Verstappen and wins that 8th championship.
So you think Charles is going to fall away?
Like I said, I think it'll be close. I don't think there'll be much. It won't be as big as a gap as it was last time out. I think the top 5, maybe, if we go Lewis, Max, Lando, Charles, and Oscar. For me, is the top 5. They'll all be very bunched together. I think you mentioned it before. This is looking on paper to be one of the best F1 seasons we've had in a while. So I think it will be close, but I'm going for Lewis.
Well, interestingly, excitingly, I've gone for a different lineup.
Yeah, we disagreed.
I am going with Lewis in third.
Oof.
Max second, and then I've put Leclerc first. I think. Look, for me, well, before I can start saying Lewis is going to win a championship, I do want to see that he hasn't lost it. I don't think he has. I just want to put that out there. But he is in his 40s now, and he will be slower than he was when he was at his peak. That's just
100%.
Nature of being older. And I think potentially that reason Charles is probably the best qualifier on the grid. Potentially. Yeah. If he can get himself into first and, often, I think that'll really count towards him. And we've seen with Charles, he is a race winner. He knows how to win. Like you said before, he's a world champion in waiting. He's one of the best drivers on the grid. He just needs an opportunity to prove that he is the best. And I think this year for him, he will. I don't think he'll give a shit that Lewis is next to him. I think he'll like having a strong teammate, but I don't see him falling away to Lewis. It'll be interesting. Max in second. I that's a bit iffy to me. That, like we said before, that depends on the Red Bull card.
Yeah.
Round up the top five. I'll go Charles, Max, Lewis, Norris, then Piastri. Potentially. Um, Look, at the end of the day, I think we all just really want a really, really good season that
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
multiple race winning fights every single race. I think that's what we all want to see. Obviously, they kick off in Australia this weekend. Do you want to give a predictor for who wins?
Well, yeah, it's 3 days away. Practice session one. The season's
Yeah,
finally back.
yeah,
Um, we do like doing way too early predictions
yeah, of course. We love it. We love
on
it
these
at the Camper Sport.
podcasts. We are a bit closer. We're not as far out as usual. Um, I don't know why. This goes against everything I've literally just said. Piastri home win.
You know what? Me
Why
too.
not?
That's what I'm going
Why
for as
not?
well. That's exactly my prediction. Australia, Piastri. It's written in the stars. Surely it's written in the stars.
Crash out lap one.
We do have a bit of news as well. Kind of
Yeah.
like you mentioned it earlier, join the sport. There'll be the 11th team starting from 2026. Good for the sport. Really good to
Yes.
see an 11th team. Good that they finally managed to figure out a way to have that 11th team. Obviously, they had something against Mario Andretti. Don't know what it was, but they clearly did. What do you think their lineup will be next year? Do you think they'll bring an American in? Colton Herta?
It's because on paper you think, right, you've got two American teams there. Haas
Hmm.
have never really gone down that route.
No.
Surely Cadillac provide the option for the American driver, and I think it makes sense for them to go for an American driver. You break the American. Obviously, F1 is all about breaking new markets, and we've seen them in America. They've got 3 races there now. This is a chance for Cadillac to really hone in on that fan base because we
Hmm.
know what Americans are like. They'll get behind their
Yeah, yeah,
boy
yeah.
and really stick by them. So it would make sense for them to go to America for an American driver. I can see them going with Colton Herta. I think he's done very well in other disciplines, and maybe give him a chance in F1, see how he does. I can also see him going with an experienced head alongside him, maybe a Valtteri Bottas, give
Hmm.
him a way back into F1. He didn't have the best couple of years with Sauber, but that car was god awful, so it doesn't surprise me. I could see maybe a scenario where Yuki goes there
Hmm.
if he doesn't get that extra year he's looking for in the Red Bull program. There's a lot of options for them. I mean, Zhou Guan Yu break the Chinese market.
Yeah.
It's for a new team. I think it's all about getting these drivers in that are going to give you the sponsorship money because, I mean, they've said it themselves. Direct quote: "We don't just want to turn up and race," which is a good sign of intent from Cadillac. They want to be up there competing, and with new regulations, we were speaking about it before we came on here. They have the chance. Every team is having a fresh start. They can really hit the ground running and compete in that top six now. It's going to be not top five. So they want to get as much money as they can in, and maybe Colton Herta and Joe Guan Yu is the way to do that. I'm intrigued to see what you think.
No, again, completely agree with you. I think they will bring in an American. Like you said, Haas haven't gone down that route, and rightly so. I think that is fair
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say. I don't think the American talent has really been there, and I don't think anyone's really wanted to throw an American into the F1 season. But maybe Colton Herta is that guy to do it. There's a lot of talk around him that he is really a very good driver and that he can hack F1. So, I think that would be really great to see. But could they do an American double? Two American drivers? Maybe. I don't know. There's potentially rumors that Sebastian Vettel wants to come back to the sport.
Fingers
I heard
crossed.
that. I heard that a few months ago. Ricardo, it all seemed lost for him last year, but that was before an 11th team was announced, so
Yeah.
he might go back for it.
Checo Perez. I didn't even think about
Yeah,
Perez.
Perez, exactly. They've got a number of options there, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good to see what they go with if they go for Bottas. I'd love it. I love Bottas. Great driver, even better human, clearly. Will Fernando Alonso make the jump just to get away from the Strolls? Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, like you said, great for the sport. They've now got a year to develop their car, develop an engine. Similarly to Audi, I know obviously they're taking over Sauber, so it'll really be interesting to see how it all kind of fits together for them. And we don't want to see them come in and just be straight at the bottom, because what's the point of that? We'll leave it there. I think we've gone to about 45 to 50 minutes. Like we said, Grice said earlier, we'll probably do these the Wednesday of a race week. So we'll do it next Wednesday and potentially the Wednesday after, but there isn't going to be a race in 2 Saturdays time. So we'll see how it all works out, but we'll definitely try to do these as often as we possibly can. Gabe is also an F1 fan, so hopefully he can come on a few of these as well. And we'll take it from there. Please let us know if you like them. Any support, any comments appreciated. If you're watching on the YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. But for now, thank you for watching. Thank you guys for joining me today, and we'll see you later. Goodbye.